Jason, thanks so much for coming tonight.
Sure.
Everyone knows who you are, but Jason Wilson is a member of our city council, and just great. I texted him this morning, said, hey, we're doing another Facebook Live. We'd love for you to come. And he's sure. And so that's what Jason does. That's one of the things I appreciate. Jason and I can always have dialogue and talk about things. And I knew this would be the case here, and it has. So he's the kind of guy, and I think at the meeting he made clear he's going to look into this. He's going to do his homework. He sent a really thoughtful and well worded email to all of you that had responded about his thoughts about it. And so just invited him here to have an opportunity for us to chat a little bit about his point of view on this and share our point of view. Take any people want to ask, polite, and because this is what we should be doing. This is how government should work. That questions come up, and and he's had the opportunity to ask those because Jason's always been the kind of person that's going to listen. So thank you for being here, and we're excited to have you here. We chatted a lot before we got online. It's one of the reasons we were a little later than we thought, because we started to talk a little bit about the different aspects that come with the issue that we're faced here today. There's obviously a lot of concerns that our group has about it. And I know that there's a lot of economic components that the city has spoken about as well. And we're going to talk about that. I know y'all have a lot of things that you want to ask, but also sort of, what's the next thing where, hopefully our hope is that we can, and this is what I've always said, that if we can just move on, decide this isn't what we want to do, move on, and then use this energy in order to work together. I'm sure we'd all rather be doing something that builds us up rather than having to fight about what we don't want. So, so I've chatted a little bit. Jason, do you want to start asking questions? Or you want to start just chiming in?
Yeah. In the words of the great Kent Murphy, hum that thing at me.
Hum that thing at you. So, we've talked a lot about what the concerns are. I'd like for you to sort of share. Have you had a chance to do some research and look at it? I know clean water and clean air has always been something. You were on the board of the Coosa River Keepers and everything, and so you probably have more background in clean air than I do. What do you think about that?
I've always been I'm a redneck hippie. I was raised in a country park, but I have worn Patagonias since about the age of 8 and spent most of my childhood camping and hiking and climbing and rappelling and doing anything I could do outside. So environmentalism has always been a thing for me. It's a conflict for a lot of people, but it's always been a big thing for me. I grew up putting anything that would float on the Coosa River and trying to go down the river on it. And I've got a small little boat that I, putter around in now on the Coosa. I've always said personally that I believe that our natural resources are our biggest resources in this community. They're the ones that matter the most. And I believe that we can build an entire economy around a tourism-based economy based on those natural resources. So yes, air, not to mention my business. Right. Like I said in my email to the group, 90% of my finished product in every can is water. And it comes from Gadsden City Water Works. So I'm incredibly worried about the water quality here. And again, like you mentioned, I've been involved with the Coosa River Keepers for almost a decade now. And we already see spikes in E. coli testing in the Little Canoe Creek area. It's a major issue. About 4 years ago, I was part of a group that helped fund and start the Coosa River Keepers swim guide program. So they go around and they test the swimming holes that we as a community frequent, and they post them every weekend during the summer and say, hey, whether it's safe to go swim here or not. And one of the things they test for is E. coli, and Little Canoe Creek consistently tests at or above E. coli limits. So there's no room for error there. Now, of course, and I'm going to do this a lot tonight, so be prepared for it. The company will tell you that they actually have very advanced systems where they collect even the runoff water from their site and run it through a wastewater treatment process. So not only are they not releasing anything into the Canoe Creek, because now there will be gas and waterworks sewer system out there for them to discharge into, they also have advanced technology that will reclaim the groundwater runoff and filter it through a system. That is the position of the company. You know, that's what they say. So, but again, I think we all have seen the track record, you know, of their environmental infractions over.
Huntsville has got a big case going with a big.
It's terrible. It's tragic.
It's really,
I mean, it was a massive spill. 150,000 fish died in the Black Warrior River up there. But here's the thing, you know, again, and this is something I've had a chance to talk about a lot over the last couple of weeks, you know. And it's funny, the Pilgrims Pride group mentioned this in their presentation with the example of an old truck and a new truck. You know, the Huntsville thing, I feel like, is distracting in this conversation because it was a plant that was built in 1960s, and it's easy to dismiss those arguments, to say it's easy for Pilgrims Pride to come back and go, yeah, well, that was a plant that was built in the 60s when there was no environmental regulations. They've put Band-Aid after Band-Aid on that plant up there. And even the Coosa River Keeper will tell you that's true, you know, that it was a terrible facility and they've tried to back their way into doing something good up there, and it's just not working. I think that's a bad example because, let me put it this way, there are new rendering facilities that have some infractions and violations that you could call into question that weren't so easily dismissed by, oh, well, that's an old plant.
Yeah.
You know, so that's my only thing.
I have a problem with the logic of that. If you're such a responsible, if you're so good to your community, then, you know, and if the technology is supposedly there in order to make it, you know, not have these problems, why haven't you done it? And the fact that has not been, that's the question that I ask, and it makes you question whether or not truly that kind of technology even is there, whether it exists. And two, if it is there and supposedly you're going to bring it, why wouldn't you help these people to bring it there?
Well, to clarify though, Pilgrims Pride will tell you that plant in Huntsville is not owned by their entity. You know, it's a separate company that.
I thought Tyson bought it.
Well, no, the Pilgrims Pride JBS and the Tyson operation are two separate entities. So that's what
they're both owned by JBS.
Ultimately,
yeah. So,
but I'm just telling you again, y'all are going to have to get used to this, because I'm going to dump a bunch of stuff out here on the table that these guys have told me. Please don't interpret that as advocacy on behalf of. I'm just sharing information. This is stuff that they've told us over the last 2 or 3 days, and we've started posing these questions, and they come back and go, well, that's this or that's that. So I'm going to do that a lot. Just know that it's not an advocacy thing.
Well, I mean, that's what this is
just
about.
Trying to share information.
This is a conversation, and that's what we're here to have. And I think the more armed we are with all of that, the better. I do have. I think there's a lot of questions that the presentation, you know, brought to light. And we want to. I think we're trying to work with Lee now.
Probably
to try
more
to figure
questions than answers, in my opinion. After I left that presentation with more questions than answers about some of the you know, the guts of this thing. Pardon the pun. You know, the actual inner workings of it. I would like to know a little more about, and then of course we've got the broader conversation about what are we as a community trying to accomplish.
Well, we hope to try to work with the city about on Tuesday how to best present the information to you guys in a coherent way that presents both sort of addresses what we believe or accuracies we need to make a little clearer on that we think about what they did, and then the argument on our side as well. And so I'm excited about being able to come before you guys on Tuesday and talk. I think we got a big group, depending on how we can get it all to work out with the city.
We got some questions, so I don't want to. And just so some of them, because of the technology of what I'm using with getting into the group, some people I can see your name, some people I can't. So
that's probably best.
So we have a question. It says, Councilman, as your neighbor and constituent, can you tell me when you first learned of this proposal?
2 weeks ago, Thursday, about 30 minutes before Christie called me and said, "Have you heard about this this ADM application for a chicken rendering plant by the airport?" And again, I'll elaborate a little bit on that. And I know Christie is probing into some questions about how this timeline worked. This is my understanding. What I've been told from day one is that in February, the State Department of Commerce referred this project to the county commission as part of a mega site project. And again, like I mentioned in my email, the mega site has recently been given priority status in the state of Alabama, which is actually a really big deal for the county. By the way, it's some good news in all of this. That is a really big deal. What it means is that we are one of the 6 priority development sites in the state of Alabama, meaning anytime, and I'll back up even a little bit further than that to say what my understanding of how the economic development process works. There's a large manufacturer out there. They want to build a facility. They hire a third party. I just want y'all to see how many layers there are between the factory, the plant, and us, the company and the city council. So the company will go out and hire a third party firm to represent them. And that third party firm reaches out anonymously to state departments of commerce, like Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, in a region where they want to be located. And they say, "Hey, we've got this project." Well, the state turns around and refers that project to several sites in the state, within the state, and say, "Hey, there's this potential project. We're not going to tell you who it is. We're not going to tell you the company name at this point. This is very early on, but we're going to send you here the kind of rough general terms of what the project is. It costs this much. It's going to create this many jobs, yada, yada." And then, so that's what happened in February. The county commission was given that referral from the state. And for several months, there was a trip made to another facility up in Iowa to tour and to get an idea of what it was going to look like. And then they came back and there was some efforts made to make the deal work. And what I've been told up until now was that the county commission on or around late July, early August, said, "Okay, this deal at the mega site isn't going to happen." Now, some people will tell you that the reason it didn't happen was simply because the county couldn't afford the $20 million price tag to run the system out there. Others will tell you now that, and I don't know what the truth is, but other people, will tell you that no, the county flatly rejected this project and said they didn't want it in the community and they thought it was dead. So I don't know what the truth is there because, again, I'm not a county commissioner. I wasn't in those meetings. But what I do know is, as a city councilman, I was made aware of it about 3 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago, whatever it was, when it was initially broached that we had a tax abatement package that we were going to review as part of this project. So that's when I found out.
Okay, there's a follow-up question about, do you have any idea when the mayor knew?
I couldn't tell you that. I wouldn't dream of speaking on behalf of the mayor's office.
And
but I do think it's important to understand, and a lot of people don't understand this, no employee of the city of Gadsden reports to the city council. Every employee in the city reports to the mayor, including the IDA boards, all of those people, they report to the mayor, and the mayor has an economic development, advisor on staff there that works closely with him. And there are a ton of things about the confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure agreements that I do not personally understand, because that is not part of what a city council person does. Contrary to what people might think, it is not a part of the responsibility of a city councilman to lead recruitment efforts for industry. We have an industrial development authority. We hire an industrial development director to run that. There's a board that's appointed to oversee that process. And so oftentimes I will be the first to admit, and I'll even take the criticism, maybe it's negligence on my part that I don't dig into these conversations further, and I'll take that criticism. But oftentimes we depend heavily on the assumption that our IDA director or our commercial development director or even K Moore with DGI, it's the same thing on a historic level with downtown. When they bring us projects, we make the assumption that they've been vetted to some degree.
When you base it on the information that is being provided to you.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. We have to assume that it's been vetted, because we don't get the full folder. Right. You know, we don't get this is what it is and this is the moving parts.
And I'm going to share with the group too. That's one of the things, like Jason saying, sort of that some timelines, how we got here. I really want us to stay primarily focused on the objective of how do we stop this. I've tried to really keep it, but I'm getting so much overwhelming questions about how did we get here? What happened? So I've spending a good deal of time on that, and I'm going to have a blog post. Is that what I do, Michael? Am I doing a blog post? Is that what you're telling me?
Sure.
Michael just tells me what to do and I do it. And so I've got a blog post that's going to probably come out in the next couple of days to kind of go into that more, because those are valid questions, and those are questions that we're all asking. How did we get here? And you're asking, how did we get here? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Was there something that a step that should have happened that didn't happen? That, you know, in some cases it it's just kind of how things work. But if you don't do it in the correct way, in a big project like this happens that could really affect lives, and you don't follow things, bad things happen. Or just an overall, and this is me, not you, I understand that, but just an overall lack of transparency, lack of sort of engaging the public and the community and the constituents on what the plan is, what the vision for the city is, where are we going here. And Jason and I talked a lot about that before this, not about that, but about a master plan. You know, where can we go as a community for that type of thing? And those are questions for another day. In some, I will have more information on that, and I'm working on those questions on a timeline.
Well, and I know this is a touchy subject for a lot of people, but I want to make it clear though that not knowing what the moving parts of this thing are on a legal, on a granular level on the legal side about Section 41 code, you know, subsection whatever of whatever Alabama code.
You've been reading the emails between me and Leah.
Yeah, like I'm you know, I know the Alabama alcohol code like the back of my hand, but outside of that, I don't have much knowledge about it. But here's what I'll say. This project, at least from my experience, from the time we were made aware of it, I was not aware of any sort of sinister attempt to prevent this. You know, the term transparency, I think there's two ways you can make that argument, in my opinion. It's, man, this system is really messed up and we need a better way of economic development and transparency. That to me is very different than saying someone within the organization acted inappropriately. And I'm not there yet with you. I agree 100% with the former statement that, yeah, there needs to be a lot more. We have to find ways to include our community in conversations about economic development. We can agree on that 100%. I do not have any information to make me feel comfortable taking it to that next step. And
I think we're saying the same thing. I'm not trying to say that there's necessarily some personal. I think that the way we've always done it, it is not.
I can agree with that.
Minimally, it's not the way we should be doing it anymore. I won't go so far as to say it's illegal or flawed, but it's not what we need to be doing anymore.
And that's the only thing I wanted to clarify.
And when you do things consistently in a way that the process excludes steps, this is what happens. You know, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter. It's a abatement for an industry that's already here. It's all great and good. It's that's why processes are there. That's why systems are in place so that it catches these things. And when you ignore that, and when you sort of go, well, it's just easier or we've always done it that way, that's when, and I think the frustration people, and this is me speaking, not you, frustration that you've heard from the community is not a new one. The idea that, well, we can't get things done because we were always told, well, that's just how it works here. And there's a handful of people that sort of, this is how that's how it works. And I think that's one of the reasons I think you're seeing the reaction to this, because it's not something new. It's the result of a lot of frustration for a long time. And so that's that. And so I'm just glad that people are asking this question.
I think that's a fair criticism. As somebody who spent my whole life in Etowah County, I mean, I'm a 7th generation resident of this. You know, you're right. I mean, for a long time, it was done kind of a little bit behind closed doors. We all know the former administration in this community left kind of with a lot of clouds about projects, and ironically enough, projects surrounding the airport.
We have a history of this. And I think people are saying, you know, that's not who we are anymore. We're tired of that. We're ready for something to do it in a different way. So I'm not interested in accusing people or making it in a personal way. I just want it to change. Yeah. I think that's what you see from this group.
And I think that's a valid.
And if it takes bringing to light how we got here in order to see why we need to change, okay. But you know, no desire is there to hurt anybody other than to bring the disinfectant that light is to things in order to see it, because you're never gonna learn and do something differently till you see, oh, well, that's why we're not getting the result we want, because we need to do it in another way. And maybe you know, people are ready to not do it that way anymore.
Yeah. So one question that I know a lot of folks in the group. So is he able to see all the research that has been found by the Facebook group and this group of folks? I'm sure it's probably come to you in the form of emails.
Sure, but y'all have to understand too, from a practical application, you know, I caught a lot of heat for sending out that blanket email to a lot of recipients. But, you know, first thing I'll say is half of y'all emailed me a blanket form email. So that's, you know, give me a little bit of a break. But I mean, literally, I got 400 and something emails. It was impossible for me to sit down and reply to each one of those individually. I mean, I would still be at home right now. But y'all also have to understand, in the middle of me trying to do my own research, I'm getting, and I appreciate it. I'm not saying don't send me stuff. I read every single email I get. I follow every link that I get, unless it looks funny, and then I'm, you know, whatever. But I'm out there trying to do my own research about stuff, and people are sending me all these documents. I want y'all to know that this is not one of these things where you have to convince me. I am likely going to come to the same conclusion that you have come to. I just didn't know anything about this 10 days ago. And I have a process like anything that I do where I evaluate the process. You go through and yes, somebody can send you a million links, but until you go out and find it yourself and read it yourself and call the person you want to call and talk to the friend that you've got that's worked at a rendering plant before, or call your buddy who used to work for this chicken processor, or I'm going to call my friend up here who sells chicken and get his feedback about these. I mean, I'm a logistics and supply chain guy. I had 3 conversations with old trucking companies I used to work with about what these chicken haulers look like. What is this tarp over the top that they're talking about? Like, they say that there's no leakage out of the bottom of them. Is that true? You know, and then I'm talking to a guy who's been hauling chicken parts for 20 years. And he goes, oh, not a chance. They leak like a sieve, you know, or, you know, I mean, those are the types of conversations that I'm having. So yes, I do get a chance to see all of the content that y'all are sending me, but I'm also doing my own research out there. And again,
I can appreciate that, Jason, the idea that and we talked about that at the beginning. Like, you know, when I called you at first, I was like, really, man, like, this is like bad. Like, and you're like, maybe Christie, but I'm not, it's the process.
Yeah.
And I think this all happened so fast for everybody. It all hit so fast. We had to educate ourselves really fast. And I think that some of the council are just having to get caught up to where we already are. And, you know, you're just more willing to get caught up. I mean, to do that and to take a look at it. I hope that we can get another council person in, and then another, as you guys start doing that research and to see, oh, okay, I see what that is. We can start having conversations.
And that's the only thing I would ask that everybody keep the faith in, is that most of the time, I tell my staff at work all the time, if you're on the phone and you think the guy on the other end of the phone is an idiot, the odds that that guy's an idiot are pretty low. You probably just don't understand something about the way he's doing his business, and it doesn't line up with the way you do business. So you need to spend a little time and figure out what he's doing, and then y'all can find a way to work together. Most of the time there's just an information gap there. So when I get these emails that say, "Are you a freaking idiot? Have you not seen this?" Well, no, I haven't seen that. And when I do see that, I'm likely going to have the same reaction that you have. If I don't have the sense of urgency, it may seem that other people have in this. I learned a long time ago, everybody has the most important thing happening to them in their life at that moment. And they are going to react accordingly. They're going to give it 100% because that's the most important thing happening in their life. The fact that for me as a small business owner, it may be one day that I'm worried that my $1 million expansion loan isn't going to go through. And there's a 96-year-old woman who lives in District 5. And that day for her, it's that the garbage didn't pick up. That's still the most important thing happening to her in her life that day. And she is going to act accordingly. And so I have to learn, how do I treat it the way I would treat it if my $1 million loan was falling apart? This is the most important thing happening to her. So I get it. I get that this is the most important thing happening to a lot of people right now. And I'm trying my best to get caught up on something that was kind of dropped in my plate 2 weeks ago, in my lap, 2 weeks ago. So,
all right. Why wouldn't they tell what the plant workers would make per hour? And have they told you in any way?
I wasn't cool with that either. And look, here's the thing. I'll say this. I don't know that he was fully prepared for what he was about to experience when he walked in there. But so here's the thing. First of all, let me say this. A lot of people say this. I'm not a moron. I know that $24.50 average pay does not mean that every worker is going to make $24.50. I understand, as somebody, as they say, who signs the front of the check and not the back of the check for the last 10 years. I promise you, I understand that managers make more money than entry-level workers. So no, it's not going to be everybody in the building making $24.50 an hour. The fact that he could not readily provide a number was concerning to me. Anytime somebody says, "What are you going to pay?" and he says, "Well, what number do you have?" and I'll tell you, that was a little unnerving. But I will say this. I can also understand from a very practical level, I'll defend the guy a little bit and say, of course, no company wants to necessarily publicly make clear what their starting wages are going to be. And I could see him saying, when he said, "I know it, I just don't want to say it publicly," there is a little bit of business logic to him not wanting to necessarily expose that number, from a competitive nature. I could see why he might not want to say that. But yes, I was as disappointed as everyone that he didn't have a more eloquent response to that.
Have they told you any more detail?
We have not gotten any follow-up information from them, although I expect sometime next week we are. Again, Thomas Worthy and myself both indicated that we wanted to go actually kick the tires in one of these plants, not a plant that's kind of like this, or not a plant that's down the road from this, but we want to see a version of what you're talking about. Now, one of the challenges there is, and I know I can hear the collective boos on the internet already, but one of the challenges here is, if you talk to the Industrial Development Board that's been working on this, they will tell you that the cost of this plant was quoted at 75, and it's likely already ballooned to more than $90 million. And the reason is because there is no plant like this anywhere else in the world. Their argument is this will be the only plant of its kind in the country, and that people will come to see this as a showpiece for how we fix the rendering industry forever. That's what that is the ticket they are providing is, the people are going to come from all over to see this state-of-the-art technology that we've implemented for the first time ever in this format. So, that is
I think it's a question too. I'm unaware, and again, there may be one issue. I've asked for the paperwork or documents or whatever surrounding this, and for various reasons that the city and attorney and I have gone back and forth on whether I should get it or not, but I don't have it. But regardless of why, I
leave me out of that one.
I know. But they're saying that. But after the abatements and the city doesn't actually enter into an agreement that requires them to do that.
So that's something I'm really focused on, and I'm glad you brought it up. We do have, and this is common misconception, I think, about tax abatement deals when we talk about giving companies a bunch of money. Understand the city does have very, very aggressive, what they call clawbacks.
Sure.
So in other words, if a company comes in and says, we're going to create 100 jobs and they only create 50, they don't get the money.
Right.
If somebody comes in and a company comes in and says, we're going to pay our workers this much average pay, and they don't pay them that, they don't get the money. You know, we don't just give companies money. And what a lot of people also don't understand about tax abatements is it is a rebate. In other words, the company actually has to do the work, generate all that money, pay their taxes, and then we turn around and give them the money back. So it's not like the city is proactively giving this company a bunch of money. We're saying, look, do what you say you're going to do. Go out and earn this amount of money and generate this much tax revenue. And then once you've paid it to us, then we'll give you back what we said we would as a rebate. So there's very few chances these days. Now, back in the day, it used to not work that way. And even in relatively recent times, there's been a couple of older projects that got out scot-free. You know, Gander Mountain ended up being a really bad deal, I think, for the city because we made a 3-year tax abatement deal with them and they stayed open 3 years and a day and then left after they got, you know,
and I get that it's if you don't employ these people, if you don't invest capital in the amount of whatever, those are what those.
But to answer your question, no.
But there's nothing that says you will build.
In my experience, no.
You will submit the drawings that show a state of the art that we will confirm it is in true. These clawbacks only claw back if you don't spend X amount of money.
And again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to speak definitively about that. But to my knowledge, no, it is.
I've never seen a city agreement.
It is uncommon to say if you have 3 ADM violations in a year, we're taking this tax abatement deal off the table. I don't see those types of deals.
Or if you don't of what state of the art means and what the protections are, even above what ADM does.
But I want to be clear. I am not an economic development expert. Those aspects of the deal could exist in some way, and I just don't know it. But to my knowledge, they don't.
I'm not aware of either.
So here's a good question along the same lines. Does the council have an estimate? Which I'm sure he also, does anybody have an estimate of when the abatement pays for itself? Additional taxes from the plant being here.
So y'all, the one thing I'll add, and I think this is good for people to know, but yes, the short answer is when we go into these executive sessions to discuss a potential deal, keep in mind that the Industrial Development Authority has been working on that deal potentially for weeks or months. Bring it to fruition, and then they bring it to us in the form of an executive session. And again, they don't tell us it's XYZ company and it's going at this physical address. At this point, it's very preliminary. They bring in an Excel spreadsheet and it's very detailed and it's a very complex document. And it says, look, our estimation is that the tax abatement will be this, and they're going to generate this much in revenue. So this will actually, the city will be in the black, so to speak, on this deal in 3 years or 4 years. You know, it does project that out and say, this is when the city will actually receive benefit from this. But again, you got to understand 2 things. Because of how these deals work, the city is not giving this money up front. So the whole idea of when do you break even? Well, you break even from day one because you never actually gave anybody any money. The day they start generating revenue for the city is making a value. What the city is saying is we'll make less money off of you than we normally would in order to get you to come here. So on day one, when they hire people and they start ordering raw materials and investing in capital and in equipment, the city is going to generate realized value from that. But as far as what you're asking is, we're giving them $5 million in abatement. And again, I made that number up. I don't know exactly what the abatement number is, but we're giving you X million in abatements, and in 3 years it's going to be paid back.
So you haven't seen the spreadsheet?
I haven't, not on this one.
No.
Again, we haven't had this session. Again, we've had no meetings about this project up until 2 weeks ago when the news broke, and we had I wouldn't even call it an impromptu. We were in between pre-council and council, and everybody said, "What's the deal with this rendering plant?" And that was the beginning of the conversation. Last week was the first formal presentation of any kind. This week, this past Tuesday, was the first formal presentation we've had.
And I think there was a comment in earlier that I did when you were talking about trust in the process. Somebody made the comment of, and I think why everybody's gotten spooled up the way they have is they felt like the process was already done before we ever got.
Yeah, and I understand that. Again, it's really difficult because the inherent nature of economic development deals is secrecy. And so that when you mix secrecy and politics, it's never a good thing. It's oil and water. It just makes people uncomfortable. But again, I used this example the other day, and this is a really practical application, and I'm not necessarily saying that's did or didn't happen here, but let's say a big factory is coming to town, and that news gets out in a transparent way. Everybody knows that this factory is coming to town. Well, guess what? Everybody in town that owns 100 acres of land just went up 20% on their price because they know that, land prices get inflated. Competitors may start coming in and considering locating in the same area. So there's a lot of practical reasons why economic development deals stay secret, so to speak, for a phase. The question is, when should that be open to the public? At what point should the public be a part of that conversation? And that's something that I don't necessarily know the answer to. Now, the other thing I'll say about trust in the process is you got to understand, David Hooks is a Gadsden native. He's been a city councilman in the city of Homewood, I think. He was director of ADECA, the Economic Development Institute, the arm of the state of Alabama. I mean, he oversaw ADECA. So when we hired him a year and a half ago, it was a huge win for the city of Gadsden because David comes with a lifetime of experience in that economic development world. So when I talk about trusting, by default, this guy came in that led the entire state economic development program. So when I talk about trusting in those agencies that are out there operating day in and day out, because again, as a city councilman, it is not roles and responsibilities to recruit industry to this city. Of course, I'm a part of that process. Of course, the city council has to be a part of tax abatement deals and things like that. But contrary to what a lot of people believe, I'm not getting on a plane and flying around to go shake hands with factory owners to get them to come here. We have agencies that do that.
And I just want to just talk a little bit about that to those that are watching and the concerns that and what Jason is saying is absolutely correct. There are confidentiality for preliminary. It's what the law does allow when there's a competitive issue, just like he's talking about, like this factory is coming to town, so land values go up or whatever. So, but there's a point at which preliminary stops. And that's the point that I think our Facebook, this group and people are concerned that point was surpassed. And whether or not it was surpassed on other projects, and that's just sort of how it's always done, or whether it was surpassed specifically for this one, and the repercussions or how serious those are for that type of thing. And I think that's something that we're working very hard, because that's the concern. That's what got us here, that what was legal within the preliminary rules because of these competitive reasons, that was surpassed, and that we're so far beyond that. We're at the door of this thing. It's knocking at our back door before we find out about it. That's what our group is validly and you
and
are
I get
too.
it. Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying
Yeah.
I can't speak to the legality of that. I don't know
And that's what
where
we're,
that preliminary point stops, and that's a conversation I'm sure that will be vetted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so before we get too much further, I think there are a couple of good questions to just throw it out there. If I can get it to come up. All right. So
water in here.
If you get in the break room, there's a bottle of water. Thank you.
Thanks.
So will you stand by your word in your email that if the people do not want this, you're willing to walk away from this project? And there's another question in there of how many members of the council have to vote no to make this go away?
And this is where it gets sticky, and I'm going to catch a lot of heat for this, I know, because it sounds like I'm dodging, and one person's already said to me in an email, well, I heard you're going to vote no just because other people are going to vote yes, so your no vote doesn't matter. But here's the thing, you have to realize I'm one of 7 votes. I'm only one person on that council, and our council works by a simple majority. You know, if 4 people vote yes for this and 3 people vote no, it's going to happen. If 3 people vote yes and 4 people vote no, it's not going to happen. So when you start talking about straw polling the council and where everybody stands, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to speak on behalf of anybody on that council. They all have voices and can speak on their own.
And I think that the question was just how many do we have to have?
Yeah, the short answer is you got to have 4 no's. There's 7 council members. You got to have a majority. So you got to have 4 people to say no.
Okay.
Now, as far as me standing behind my commitment in my email, absolutely. If it is apparent to me that this community is opposed to this project. Now, I'll say this, and people are going to call this political talk because I'm going to tiptoe a little bit here. I am still open, though, and the reason I won't come out and unequivocally say I'm a no vote on this project 100% is because I'm still open to the idea that as this conversation continues, that I'm keeping a completely open mind, that there's a chance that this community decides maybe, okay, we can live with this. That's why I'm not going to just come out and say no. I will commit 100%, though, to say that if it is blatantly obvious that the will of this community is not to do this, I will vote no on it. Okay, I will commit to that 100%. However, I leave myself open. Call me an optimist, but I leave myself open to the idea that the conversation could go in a lot of directions over the next few weeks as all of this information gets hashed out and, blah, blah, blah. But yes, I will commit to that. Now, the one challenge I will make to everybody in this community, and Christie and I were talking about this before we started this project, is where do we go from here? I will walk away from this, but here is the reality that we have to recognize as a community. We already have a chicken plant in this town. We have a chicken processor in this town. More than 40% of all the chickens grown in the United States are grown within a 200-mile radius of this community. If we are not going to be in the chicken business, which I am totally fine with not being in the chicken business. I mean, if you ask me to list 100 things I would like to build an economy around, chicken would not be in the top 10. Poultry processing probably would not be in the top 10. But the fact is, it is a huge economic driver in this part of the country. We are in what they refer to as the broiler belt. Between Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, over 70% of all the chickens raised in America are raised in those 3 states. I am totally fine with that. But where do we go from here? What is the master plan for this community? Growth for the sake of growth is a bad thing. You don't just grow to be growing. You have to be growing towards something, because if you're not growing towards something, this type of happens. You have projects popping up all over here and there, and then we get in these huge community fights about it, and everybody burns bridges, and there's all this bad blood out there. And the only thing that suffers in all of this is our community, because we don't have a master plan that is inclusive of all the 13 municipalities in this county, the smallest county by landmass in the state of Alabama. And we don't have a master plan between our 13 communities that make up this county about where we want to go as a community. So again, I'm fine with walking away from the chicken industry if that's what we're going to do. But where do we go from there? And again, I'll say this in David Hook's defense. He's catching a lot of heat, and he's a big boy. I'll let him defend himself. But David laid out a plan a year ago when he came here, and he said, I believe food processing is the future of this region for all the reasons that I just said. Now, obviously, a rendering plan is the worst version of that, in the food processing world. I understand that. But he laid out a plan and a vision and said, I believe we can build economy around here off food processing. So if the rendering plan is the beginning of us kind of not all collectively agreeing to that, then I'm fine. Let's move past this and go on to something else.
Let me sum up just with that statement, sum up some of the comments that are in there. What on earth? So, okay, if you want to put it in here, what on earth would make somebody think that it's a good idea to put it in an airport?
Well, look, again,
is that a fair assessment?
If you're going to ask the question, I'll answer it. I'm telling y'all, I'm the only guy in the room that's having conversations with both sides of this argument. So please, y'all, just hear me out.
We appreciate that.
When I give y'all this,
just so you know, there's a lot of thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
No, that's fine. I just don't want y'all to think that when I say this stuff, these talking points, that it's somehow me embodying or fighting. I'm just sharing.
We didn't know we were getting in the chicken business.
Yeah, well, exactly.
That was the point.
Exactly.
I was exactly about to say. You were just saying that's what David Hook said, and I was like, well, who asked us?
Yeah.
And that's your point.
Sure.
We don't have a master plan. We don't have.
Exactly.
I get it was Hooks or whatever. It was their vision. It was their vision.
Right.
But who asked us if that was our vision? And you've been screaming that since you came on the council, Jason. To be honest, you've talked about vision and master plans, and you've been talking about this is what happens. This is like the poster child for what you've been saying. What can happen if you don't have a master plan?
Yeah.
So I want people to be aware of that. When you got on the council, that was one of your platforms when you got on it, and you asked for it, and they haven't done it.
Yeah.
And so this is, and I think those are the kind of questions we should be asking. Whose vision is it? And if it's not ours, say it's not ours, and then let's come up with, let's decide what our vision is.
That's again, that's where so much of my optimism is focused, is where do we come out of this with? But to go back to the question that I don't think I ever actually answered, who in the world would ever want this close to an airport? You have to understand the logic from an industrial development standpoint is, everybody says typically you build these places in rural communities. And I'll say this, and I'll say it abruptly. We are a rural community. The logic was simple. It may be flawed to people who are on the other side of this coin, but the logic was, put it out there by the airport. Nobody lives out there. There's 7 houses within a half-mile radius. That is the most rural part of the county. We get out there, have the minimal about this. This city has a long history. This community, this county has a long history of some pretty bad industrial development, placement deals. You look at the steel plant right in the middle of our downtown. You look at where the Goodyear plant was located, right on the banks of the Coosa River. So I think the logic was get it out of town, get it out here on the edge of town, and what better place than out by the airport? Where it's rural and there's not a lot of houses. So again, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just telling you what their thought process was let's move it out here in a rural zone by the airport where it's already loud and it's already zoned industrial. Not a lot of people like to live by the airport anyway. That's another thing when we talk about master planning. I'm fine with walking away from this project, but I hear a lot of people casually in passing talking about getting some sort of a regional commuter plane service out of the city of Gadsden. And there's a lot of reasons that's going to be really hard to do. But my question is to those same people that live around the airport, what are you going to do when a Boeing 737 is flying over your house every afternoon? If we're going to get this regional plane service, that brings a whole nother set of questions up about what do we want that airport and the 400 acres of industrial land around it to be? What is the right answer out there?
As a guy with an aviation background, again, trying to sum up some of the comments and the frustration and a lot of the discussion. So who in the, and I know is mentioned in the city council about subject matter experts.
Yeah, right.
Who has the city hired who has been appointed or elected that is an aviation expert and actually understands the dynamics and the potential of that airport? And what's the plan?
Listen, man, I got over 40,000 Delta Sky miles. No, I'm kidding.
And you stay in the Holiday Inn, right?
Yeah. No, obviously, no. The short answer is no. But again, I'll defend the municipal process a little bit here and to say, and this may open up a whole nother Pandora's box, but the logic is that's what we have an airport authority for. Is we're supposed to have an agency that runs the airport, and there's a board of directors that manages that agency. And so I'll kick the can down the road on that a little bit. I mean, I'm not the airport guy.
And this is something I bet you probably don't know. I mean, because your learning is you go here.
Yeah.
Apparently, in the documents that I do have about this project, there's been, promises made by the city, but that you talk to members of the airport authority, they weren't consulted on some of this stuff. Now, some were, and some were not. But it makes it look as if, and people, right or wrong, people thought this for years. I mean, before our current that the airport authority is just a rubber stamp of what the city does, and that the city just comes in and I'm not saying whether that's, but the airport authority, and if the airport authority had no knowledge of it, then how does this be promising?
Look, the only thing that I can say definitively about the airport authority, because again, I've heard those same rumors about the accusations about the airport over the years, over the decades.
Yeah,
I mean, a long time. Mm-hmm. All I can tell you is that when I became a city councilman, I appointed Tim McCartney to the airport authority board. Tim McCartney is an upstanding member of this community and someone that I have the utmost respect for. And he's been on that authority for a short amount of time, less than a year. So I can't speak to it other than to say the role I play as a city councilman is to try to appoint people that I trust into those positions to have those conversations.
And so the comment is no one on the airport board has any aviation experience. That's a personal frustration that I've seen. It's been very little. So
I'll tell you this, the only person I know that has any real aviation experience, I love him to death, but I would never put him on the airport authority board. He's crazy. But I mean, he's a hell of a pilot, but I would never put him in a position of leadership out there. And I'm joking when I say that, but literally, I don't know any aviation experts. I mean, that live in District 5 that I can appoint to that authority. So then your next best option is, okay, can I find a seasoned businessman who's been in a lot of industries, who understands how, complex issues work, and is that good enough? And if the answer to that question is no, it's not good enough, I accept that criticism. I'll take that as a criticism. Maybe I should have spent more time, with my appointment to the airport authority board. But again, I don't know many aviation experts. Although my degree from Auburn, believe it or not, is I'm technically in a logistics and supply chain guy, but at the time the degrees were combined, and I have an aviation management and logistics degree from Auburn. That's what it says on my diploma. So maybe I am an aviation expert. Not kidding.
There's how many?
There's 7 houses. Well, where's the 7 houses?
7 houses.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a comment that kind of sums up some of that. You're talking about the rural and what's out at the airport.
Yeah.
So the comment is if we have nearly 2,000 kids in 3 different schools within 1 mile of this location, I would not consider that rural.
I hear you. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but this is what happens. The number, anytime you're in a heated debate, the tendency of a lot of people is to kind of downplay a little bit the good parts and upplay the bad parts. So what I've seen is, for example, the original proposal from the company said that they would average 2.4 trucks an hour. When I first saw that like 2 Thursdays ago, by Sunday, the number was 500 trucks a day. In the social media, it's going to be over 500 trucks a day. And then what the Pilgrims Pride will tell you, that the goal of the way they've built this plant is that the smell will never leave the 88-acre property. that is the way that is their position, is that the smell of this plant will be contained within this 88-acre parcel, and there will be no time, with the exception of maybe when a filtration or a scrubber goes down, where that smell would travel outside there. That is their official statement. Now, the half-mile radius was done, and then the 1 mile radius, that's done with any industrial project. It doesn't matter. You always do a half mile, 1 mile, what they call rooftop count. Now, as far as the schools, when you actually draw the 1 mile circle, and you're talking about John Jones and Rainbow Middle, both of which I attended, by the way, and then Westbrook, I don't know where they actually fall in that 1 mile radius. But again, the company's contention is this smell, that's a moot point, that this smell's never going to leave the site.
Do you
So,
community, do they give you a community that they can actually show us that community they have control?
no, and again, and I need to put the context here too when I say the company says. I have not had an opportunity outside of what you guys saw on Tuesday, the questions that I was asking in that public setting. I have not sat down with Pilgrims Pride and said, answer this, answer this, answer this. I've not been given the opportunity to do that. When I say the company says this or the company says that, it's primarily based on literature that they've provided the council, not a one-on-one dialogue with them. And I'm still hopeful that will happen, and I'll have the opportunity to have that one-on-one dialogue. But yeah, I mean, they're not, I haven't done that yet,
Okay, so and to kind of sum up some of that, are you leaning towards, do you believe them or not believe what they're saying about the smell?
Because obviously, I've read all the articles you've read. I saw their executives get arrested for corruption and bribery, and I've read all of the same articles that y'all have. If you're asking me, do I believe every word that they're saying? Of course not. Of course they have there is a reason why they're trying to build this facility here, and this is not original content for them. They've done this in other communities. They've had to fight these fights in other communities, and they've got, I get it. But at the same time, I can tell you that from experience, there is often a lot of misinformation generated about an industry or a specific industry that they do spend millions of dollars trying to overcome and trying to rectify, scars of their past. Again, this Hanceville plant that we all talk about, you saw in the Pilgrims Pride presentation, they put the old truck up there and the new truck beside it and said, this is the difference. This Hanceville plant was built in the 1960s by somebody that didn't have anything to do with Pilgrims Pride. And here we are actually trying to make a genuine effort to clean up our industry and wipe the mud off of our face and actually put a good foot forward and show that we can be a part of the community, and be a good steward of the community. And that's all I'm giving them, is the benefit of the doubt, is working through that. But of course, I've seen all of the mountain.
Let's not get any fix.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I guess that's what I mean. In the presentation, it's state of the art, but when you look at the presentation, like it's a picture of a box on a paper. I mean, and it's a picture of, like, what does that even, like, what does that even
well, I will tell
mean?
You
I mean, there's no.
I will tell you from my perspective, those air filtration systems and wastewater treatment systems, I'm familiar with that technology just because I'm in the brewing industry. We deal with a lot with wastewater treatment. We pumped.
But how is that technology new? They're using that in other. I mean, that's not state of the art.
Well, no, that's what. Well, I'm just saying it's happened. There are a lot of evolutions and process improvements that happen in the wastewater and air quality, air treatment world. For us, we worry a lot. I mean, I shipped 250,000 gallons of beer out of that place over there. So that's about 2.5 million cans of beer. Well, we use a lot of water, and we use the city sewer system. So we have to monitor dissolved oxygen levels before we release the water back into the sewer. We have to have settling tanks, to allow particulates to settle out and things like that. So there are new technologies that are being invented all the time in those communities, when it comes to scrubber systems.
I get that, but
But
they're not even saying that, Jason.
But
like,
to your point,
it's
Christie,
literally like just we're doing state of what is.
well,
What does that mean?
like I said, the water treatment facilities that are equipment that they referenced in that presentation, I'm familiar with that technology, and it is relatively new technology. Now, the greater point that I share with you, concern that I share with you, Christie, is what you said earlier, which is they can come in and show us this stuff in a presentation all day. What in our agreement with them creates some sort of ramifications if that equipment was not installed or utilized, or if they didn't maintain the smell within the acreage of the property? Do we have a way to drop the hammer on somebody and say, okay, you don't get this deal. We do have a fine system. And that's the reason I asked them last Tuesday, how often are you inspected by ADEM, and what is the maximum fine that ADEM can levy against you? And the answer is $250,000. That's the most that ADEM can levy against any company.
Which online is going to tell you they'd rather pay that fine than invest the other millions of dollars.
And there's
technology. They'd rather just pay the fine.
And there's other examples of that in this community. You know, I mean, we have a lot of people that deal with ADEM issues.
That's an economic, but in this particular instance, of this particular industry,
It's troubling. You listen to the opponents on a national level to rendering plants in general. They'll tell you that one of the reasons that these places target Alabama is because we have a somewhat a reputation for an environmental management agency that doesn't really enforce their permits, that they don't do inspections as regularly as they should, and they have a relatively small maximum fine that they could levy against you. So, like you said, a lot of these companies who are determined to violate the law are just out there looking for a place that is not enforcing the law, and that's where they go to build.
I think some of these people feel it's just it is what it is. It is what they do. They're bringing raw chicken in trucks down your road to the facility.
Yeah,
it is what it is. That is going to smell.
Yeah. Sure. And you know, that's my thing is, rather than saying, oh, it's not going to smell at all. I mean, I don't think that's a logical argument, but it would be different if they were saying, look, we're only going to bring our trucks in at night when everybody's asleep, so it'll have minimal impact. And, you know, we're committing X amount of dollars to, you know, we'll have a sprayer system that comes down the road every night and rinses off, you know, whatever. If there are some good faith efforts, and those may still be to come. I mean, they may make those proposals as we go through this process, but I don't know what to expect.
Well, so we've been going for a little over an hour. We got about 200, and I'm seeing about 215 folks hanging out with us. Which I'd say is a pretty good crowd for a Thursday night. Talking about chicken plants.
Yeah.
To the guy that said online the other day when somebody posted that email, and I saw a response, and the guy said, "Oh, this is that loudmouth environmentalist that hangs out at Blackstone and annoys everybody. Just so you know, I'm going to go to Blackstone right after this. If you want to come down and have a beer with me."
So one comment, and I can't find it to pull it back up, but it was basically, so how many emails, how much text, back to the discussion of you're going to do what the community wants you to do, what your constituents want you to do. How much is enough to convince you?
Well, again, that's what I want y'all to know. I mean, it's not a volume game. It's not about how many people call me. You know, it's not about how many people text me. It is clear to me that the community is not in favor of this project right now. Okay. What I'm telling y'all, and the reason I won't give you what you all expect me to do, which is to just come out and say, I'm a no vote. What I'm not doing is I'm telling you, I'm going to let this process happen. And when it comes time for me to vote, if the community has not been swayed, because what I'm leaving open for that you guys are absolutely not leaving open is that maybe there's some sort of version of this conversation that makes everybody go, this wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Maybe this could be a good thing. Let's do it. I recognize that there's virtually a 0% chance of that happening.
Thank you for saying that before everyone in the comments
What
did.
I'm saying is, I'm not going to become a part of the story. I'm going to let this thing happen, and at the end of it, I'm going to levy my vote. And I'm telling you right now that if the general sentiment of this community is the same as it is today, I will vote no when given the opportunity. At the same time, again, I am leaving open to the idea that there's a lot of conversations over the next couple of weeks that'll happen in a public forum. And if, because believe it or not, guys, I've gotten a couple of dozen emails from people that go, what are these people talking about? We need these jobs. Nowhere near as many as I've gotten in opposition to it. I've gotten hundreds in opposition, maybe a dozen, maybe 12 people that have emailed me and said, I'm for this. So again, I'll let it go for the next couple of weeks, and y'all can all scream and holler at it at each other. But ultimately, at the end of 2 weeks, I'm telling you right now, I have some serious concerns with primarily the environmental impact. But again, the company will tell you we're actually going to be the best steward and the least polluting business that's operating in that footprint. That's what their statement says, is we'll treat the water, we'll reclaim the runoff water, the storm water, and treat that before we put it back in the sewer. We're not going to put anything into Canoe Creek, as far as wastewater. So that's why I say, guys, I'm going to let this conversation run its course over the next 2 weeks. But I'll, again, if the energy is the same as it is right now in this community, of course, I don't know.
Signal issues.
Are we? No. Well, are we still on?
We are.
Well, this wasn't bad, was it, Jason?
So especially since I can't hear them. Yeah. They're all just out there wearing me out, but I just can't see them.
Can we go let's end on a positive note about where we go moving forward as a community. I mean, we kind of danced around that. We talked about some of the master plan, but what's going to happen? Well, what are we doing moving forward?
I think we gotta get to the conclusion of this and get a no. And that's the way I see it. Jason may have a different. We got to get to the conclusion, hopefully sooner rather than later, so we can move on. Get a no, because I think the concern is if this just sort of peters on for months and months, or if there's some idea that, not from you but from other members of the council, that we're just going to kind of go dark on this and it'll just fade away and die. I don't think that this group has expressed some real concerns about that, about having concerns about how people were unaware of it to begin with, that just kind of letting it go dark and fade away is not something that everyone feels very comfortable with. They want a definitive no, and I think they deserve that. I think people deserve to know, and that this is not where we're going to go, and hopefully we can get there and then move on to talking about using this group to maybe talk about, okay, this is not what the vision of this group is for our county. What is? And we could get you back. Well, and we can talk about that. And we can talk about that.
That, like I said, that's my biggest thing is, okay, if we walk away from this, I'm fine with that. But where do we go from here? We cannot be a county of what we aren't. We can't just be a group of people sitting around talking about what we don't want. We have to talk about what we want, and we have to, like I said earlier, growth for the sake of growth. Just growing to grow is not what you do as a community. You pick a place that you're trying to get to. Mm-hmm. You have to first say, we want to be here, and now we're going to take deliberate steps to get here. You can't just say, well, we need to grow. We need jobs. Well, there's some people in this community that say, I don't want Gaston to grow. I love it. It's beautiful. It's quiet. We don't want this place to have 5 million people in it. Maybe there are economies that can work in this community that doesn't require us to surrender our land to large industrial projects. There's so many different ways that we can build a community. And the fact that this many people are actually involved in the conversation now, it's a huge opportunity for us to actually talk about where we go from here.
And sometimes I hear you. We can't just talk about what we aren't, but sometimes there is nothing like when you don't know what you want to be. Sometimes there's nothing like making real clear what you're not.
Yeah, sure.
To make you
Sure,
ask
you
the
don't wanna
questions
be.
Yeah.
of what am I? And I think the community.
Well, I think that's the first step
That's right.
towards knowing what you
And
want
I
to be.
think-
Is knowing what
I
you don't
think
want to be.
this issue has crystallized people into, okay, we are not that. That is not who we are. And so let's get that decision made. Let's make that crystal clear. And then let's start asking the next question. Okay, now what are we then? So, and again, maybe we can, come back another time and talk about.
I'd be happy to.
that.
And Christie, like I told you, man, the grassroots movements are the only ones
I know.
that I've seen work. And so, I mean, y'all do what you do, and the process is going to work itself out. And I think that
We're going to be back with you on the 8th. We're going to be at the council meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So
I think that'll be great.
And so we're excited to be there. We hope everybody else can come out too and see that. So that's where this thing's headed.
So I threw up, so we've got advanceetowah.com is a website that I've set up to try and help consolidate some of this conversation. Obviously, the immediate focus is going to be on the rendering plant, but hopefully it's a platform that can pull some voices together. So guys, there's not a lot there right now. I'm going to try and add a lot of the stuff out of this group and a lot of that content, the blog posts, as you were talking about. So guys, stand by. You can go check it out. There's a few links, but it's probably going to take you right back to the group you're already in. So we'll be Advanced Etowah.
And this wasn't bad. So maybe other council members would love to come. We'll be nice. We hope that we want. This is great. This is the kind of conversations that we should be having, that the community should be having.
Sure.
You don't mind. You like having these kind of conversations.
I do.
I know you,
Yeah.
Jason. You like it. So how can we encourage the council that this is how we do things around here,
Yeah.
and this is what we do, and it's not just behind closed doors, and it's not just. And so I hope that the others have seen this and hopefully will come and have this conversation.
I'll let you
and commit
continue.
the same thing that you committed.
I'll let you continue to make that lobby, but again, I'll restate, I would not dream of speaking on behalf of any other member of this council. I'm one person and one vote, and they all have their own opinions.
You don't want more.
The point is that invitation is something that
Sure.
that I think is definitely out there, and we need to have. So I'm gonna call them all and see if they'll come and do that.
Go for it.
I'll do it. I hope so.
Right. If they ask me how it went, I'm going to tell them it was fine.
All right. Well, I guess we'll close it up and head to Blackstone.
There you go. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
We'll see y'all tomorrow night.